And some people, maybe are a little bit too far on the pseudoscience spectrum. Generally what I do is very grounded, logical stuff and just kind of focusing on like what are the fundamentals of human health. But we went to China in naturopathic school to learn Chinese medicine. So we kind of got like the full immersion there. I find it more effective to start with some of the lower hanging fruits and get people's, motivation and confidence up. Are you drinking enough water? Are you hydrated? Are you drinking good quality water? What kind of food are you eating? Are you eating food that's hurting your body? Are you sleeping well? Yep. Are you managing your stress? Now we need to go to the grocery store and actually think and use our logic to determine what foods we need to be eating. In 50, 60 years, we won't be able to grow food because our soils are so depleted.
Do you believe that it might get better? I'm Matt Mack and this is BloodyMavericks. Today we have a naturopathic doctor with a passion for health, connection to nature, sport and spirituality. Hi up Kesehe, Dr. Andrew Chelladurai.
You got it.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
How was my Hindi?
I have no idea. I don't speak Hindi. I actually don't speak any Indian languages. So
all right.
It sounded legit though.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked it.
Maybe someone gonna correct me later on. We'll see. So Andrew, Hindi because your family is from India. Have you been born here or have you been born there? How does the story look like?
Yeah, so I was born here. So my dad was born in India and he moved here when he was 12.
Okay.
And my mom was born in Canada actually. So I'm half Indian. And so he's actually Tamil, which is a different kind of culture, I guess.
Yeah.
So I believe Hindi is the most common language, but he would actually speak a totally different language. But I don't know any of them, as I said, unfortunately.
I get you. With India, for sure, from what I heard, people I talked to already, it's like every 100 kilometers, almost, you've got a different language. Yeah, so it's crazy. Yeah. It's awesome. And so before we dive deeper into the background, the culture and everything, let's try what we have here, which is basically an Indian version of a similar dish that is across Middle East. Indian is called shawarma, right? Or saj, I think. This one, especially from the place that I picked it up today, is called saj. And one is is a vegetarian because it's with falafel, and another one is chicken shawarma.
They look amazing.
Go at it.
Okay. I think I'll start with the chicken. Chicken's always my go-to, but I like both.
Cool. Good.
Really good.
And this is actually a place that you recommended earlier. Never tested it before, but
this was my go-to when I lived in Toronto. There's something about the bread, just like the saj bread as they call it. It's super thin, but it's like crispy. But it's a very unique texture.
It is so good, and it's different. Like. Because as I mentioned earlier, you can have a similar kind of dish, wrap, whatever you may call it, across Middle East. You can have shash kebab, you can have Turkish versions of it, and then Lebanese versions of it, you've got Indian versions of it, but it's there are slight differences for sure, especially the pickles in here. Like this is not something that I have seen a lot.
Right. Yeah, it adds a nice like tart flavor. Yeah, it's really just the like the spices and the sauces. There's so much variation depending on where you go, right? But everywhere seems to have like some form of bread with like meat and veggies mixed in, and it's just like there's endless options.
That's right.
Are you Eastern European?
Technically Central, but
what country?
Poland.
Okay, do they have something like this, like a wrap? No?
So, there are definitely Turkish people who sell similar wraps, but that's, as I said, and especially for Poland, they call it kebab, which is this type of wrap. If you go and buy kebab in Turkey, you will have it probably on a platter, straight as a dish, right? Instead of a wrap.
Okay.
But still, yeah, I am familiar with similar type of dishes, which is this is super simple as well, right? You've got everything just wrapped around, and you eat it with this really thin bread, as you mentioned, which is pretty tasty as well. Yeah, it's cool.
Did you see, last time I was there, they had a screen showing how they make the bread. Did you get to see that?
No.
It's kind of like a massive like pot or pan flipped upside down, and the heat comes from below.
Oh.
And they just roll it out super thin, and then you just kind of lay it over top of this concave surface, and it's just like 30 seconds, flip, put it over, and that's done.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That is cool for sure.
That sauce is really good. I don't know what it is, but
there was one of their own house sauces and some garlic one as well. But yeah, it's definitely not the cleanest dish for your fingers, but
that's all right. It's worth it.
So, Andrew, on the side of your family, how does it look like? You mentioned your father came here when he was 12. He came obviously with his parents.
Yeah, so actually my grandpa came here first. So I don't think he had ever left India actually until he was like 40, and then came straight to Canada to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan actually. So he literally would have gone from like plus 40 to negative 40 weather.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah,
a rough transition.
I mean, that can't be like good on your body either. That's probably quite the shock. But anyways, he survived. And I'm not sure. I think he might have been there for a few years just to get stabilized, like to get a job, work, and then once he was there for a while and settled, then my dad came over with his mom, and he has a brother as well, older brother.
Okay.
Yeah, so they all came together.
How about your mother's side? How does the lineage look like there?
Yeah, so my mom was born in Canada. I believe both her parents were. Her mom was like my maternal grandma might have been born in Chicago, if I recall correctly. I think their parents came from Britain, but I'm not super clear on who exactly came over. But that's where their side is from.
Okay.
I think I had a bit of French in my genetic testing as well. I'm not sure I could like trace that back, but somewhere along the line.
So you've done your like DNA tests as well?
Yeah, it's basically like half Indian, like that area, and then half like European around like France and England, that kind of area. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Okay. That's pretty cool to see.
It is, for sure. So if you look back on the childhood that you had and how you've been raised, any special things that let's start with the Indian culture and the Indian background, anything that you recall that was so typical to it?
Yeah, honestly, not so much at home. Like, we didn't really have too many Indian traditions. I'd say more so when we went to my grandparents' house. And mostly it was just related to food, I'd say. Like, we didn't have too many specific practices. They were Christian, so they didn't, it wasn't any like novel religious practice that you might see in like, Hinduism or some of those other cultures, Sikhs maybe. But just the food it was always Indian food, and it was like, it's just such a treat.
Yeah.
And I actually can't handle a lot of spice. So I always recall my grandma making me specifically non-spicy chicken and all the foods I liked. So Yeah, that'd probably be the main thing. But in my day-to-day regular life, there wasn't a ton of Indian culture, to be honest. Sometimes I wish there was a little bit more, but I think it's tough when one of the parents, might still have that background and the other one doesn't. But also my dad came here when he was 12, so he kind of assimilated into the culture and you lose a lot of that stuff. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
He's more Canadian than Indian, probably.
Right. Yeah, like he doesn't have an accent at all. Like, obviously his skin color is different, but you wouldn't really be able to tell otherwise. Yeah.
Makes sense. And if you look on your mother's side, the English, if you mentioned that they came, some of the family was from Chicago.
Yeah.
And was there anything on that side that you recall?
Not really, to be honest. No, pretty standard. I wouldn't say anything out of the ordinary. Yeah, I don't really know a ton about like British culture. I guess it's fairly similar to Canadian. But yeah, I've never traveled there. Like I have been to India before, so it's cool to learn a little bit more about that. But I've actually never been to the UK, so yeah, I don't really know much about it. So yeah,
okay, yeah, it's still on the list. Is it?
For whatever reason, it's never been super high on my list. But I would like to go one day, and I wonder if we could track back like where the exact city. I'm sure we could where my family came from and just go see it. I would love to do that at some point. But for whatever reason, I'm always more called towards like Asia. That's just for whatever reason I've been more interested in that, and maybe just because it's different, right? It's a little bit more novel, more exciting. So yeah.
So you've been. How many times you've been to India?
Just once.
Once.
I was 12.
Okay.
So it was pretty cool from what I remember, but also when you're 12, like you don't have the same appreciation that I'd have now.
Oh yeah.
And I do recall just like complaining. I was a pretty picky eater, so I was like, I don't like this food, and it's very hot too. So probably not appreciating it as much as I could have. So I'm definitely overdue to go back at some point. And I still have some family there, so I need to take advantage while they're still alive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. And you said your father is from Tamil side, right?
Yeah, so that's like a province, more so in southern India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you would be going back, what would your aim be like? Like in terms of, not specifically a city, I would say, but in terms of discovery and...
Yeah. Well, now that I'm into the field of health, I would probably have that as my main focus, is learning more about, because they have such a rich history of, it's called Ayurvedic medicine. It's kind of like, a lot of people have heard of traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah. It's like the Indian equivalent. It's a very old system of medicine. Some people would argue it's the oldest, written history we have of medicine. So there's a lot of, wisdom there. And my great aunt actually is a medical doctor there, still practicing. And she's probably getting close to, she might be close to 90 actually.
Wow.
And I think she's still doing quite well. So it would be cool to learn from her.
Is she practicing Ayurvedic medicine as well?
Yeah. So I think she combines it, like she's a medical doctor, so she has that, conventional training, but I think she still practices quite a bit, incorporating the natural side as well. Yeah, she has a lot of charity work as far as I know, and I believe she still lives on a mango and banana farm, so that's another reason to go visit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Fresh mangoes from a tree straight away in the morning, right?
Yeah. Well, that's where my grandpa grew up, so he's always telling me stories about how that was just their life, right? They were farmers, like most people were, so all their duties were to just, grow mangoes, and I think they had rice as well, but mangoes, bananas, and rice. Wow. I think I could live off of that.
Oh yeah.
A little give me some fish here and there, but otherwise that'd be great.
Makes sense. So you said that. Because you are into your practice right now and you went, that's the field that you are in, which is naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic, right? Is there anything specific in India, like any teacher, any courses, anything like you could really go deep into to figure it out and learn from? And
right. Yeah, I haven't looked into like specific courses, but I'm sure there's plenty. Also, like as you mentioned in the bio, I'm also interested in spirituality, which is cool in Ayurvedic medicine because they actually incorporate that into it. Like Ayurveda just means the science of life. So they're looking at the physical body, but also, you know, the mental, the spiritual, and incorporating all of those things together. So I would like to find something ideally that incorporates all of those. I know they have these famous centers called Panchakarma centers, which is a certain type of detox. And I don't know all the specifics of it, but they're trying to find ways to detoxify all of those levels, right? So the physical body through diet and herbs and that kind of stuff, but also practices like meditation and yoga and other things to, you know, detoxify and cleanse mentally, spiritually, in all aspects. So I think it'd be cool to go to one of those centers and spend some time there and just see, you know, what do they do when you go to, you know, their version of a healing retreat? What kind of stuff do they do?
For sure.
Yeah.
I read in a book about breathing actually that the origin of yoga was just breath work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people nowadays, like in the Western world, it's all about movement and exercise, but yoga just means connection, or yoking maybe is like the technical definition, but the point of it is to connect to something higher than ourselves. And movement is one way to do that, but the breath, pranayama is what they call it, is another way. And just like straight up meditation, like those are all parts of yoga. So not to say that the movement part isn't important, but I think if you're talking to like a legit yoga teacher, they would just say, you know, that's like one aspect of what yoga actually is.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, yeah, definitely there's way more to discover and figure it out, even like the Western versions of those old ways or even medicine, as you mentioned earlier. It's like westernized, so it's more adjusted to so people can swallow it better.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Yeah, so that's what I mean, it would be cool to go there and actually learn how different it is from my conceptions. But I have a pretty good base of Chinese medicine, at least. We learned more so of that in school. And I don't know if Marissa had mentioned to you, but we went to China for 5 weeks in our undergrad, or in naturopathic school to learn Chinese medicine. So we kind of got like the full immersion there. Awesome. So it'd be cool to see what it's like in India, because I know there's a lot of parallels and overlap.
For sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So, like, just staying around the background side, and what you have as your heritage is, what would say that there is one thing or couple things that you carry through life that kind of keep you or made you successful or are important to you?
Yeah, I think just embracing being different. So I grew up in London, Ontario, which is fairly multicultural now. When I grew up, not quite as much, but I do recall being like one of the few kids who, you know, wasn't white, essentially. Like I definitely wasn't the only one, but I was definitely different. Yeah. And at certain times, I don't think I did embrace it when you're young, because you feel like, oh, I'm different than them. But then as you grow older, you celebrate and you kind of embrace it, and you think it's like, oh, this is cool that my dad grew up in India and it's, you know, very different. So I think just holding on to that. And yeah, I guess I've just continued to embrace that throughout my life, and I think that has helped me, instead of just, you know, going with the herd all the time, right? Just the ability to think different and be outside the box. And it's a work in progress. Like I still, you know, tend to conform to a lot of things, but I feel like once you have a bit of that spark of just thinking different, it just opens up so many different possibilities. So that was probably the biggest thing, to be honest, because like I said, I didn't have any major cultural differences, but I think just, you know, being a little bit different and embracing that has helped a lot.
Makes sense for sure. And that embracement, was it, I just want to figure out if it was in times hard for you to be different back, especially the hardest years when that's a troublesome is the childhood, right?
Yeah.
Where other kids might like bully you or make fun of you, right, or whatever it might be, right? Because because just lack of understanding, right?
Yeah, I think I do recall a little bit in elementary school. It wasn't even, major bullying, but maybe just some comments here and there. And I don't think they're even meant to be derogatory, but I probably just took them personally, right? And at that age, it's like you said, it's so like transformative, and all you want to do is to fit in, right? So you're still kind of like insecure. But I think once I got to high school, part of it was probably that there was more, people in the school, more diversity, so I wasn't as different, right? But then, I guess at that point, once you start to mature a little bit and embrace those things, then it became easier, and suddenly it became, I don't want to say a superpower, but more of a power, right? I use it to my advantage.
For sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And like, if someone wouldn't know your background, it's hard to say, right? Because, it's... and like, especially that we do live in such a multicultural city, it's like everyone has something there, right? Mixed up. It's and I can imagine that living in a smaller city would be different, right? Might have different
100%.
impact.
No, I agree.
If you would think about what you do and how you went about getting there, what would you tell me?
Yeah, people always ask me like how I got into naturopathic medicine, and it's tough to say what the main thing was, but I was always into sports growing up. That was kind of like my religion, you could say. Like, it just consumed me 24/7, so I was always playing different sports. I got pretty serious into volleyball, so that at a certain point that kind of became my main focus. And I knew I wanted to play in university, and I got recruited, played in university. And I think at a certain point, something clicked with me wanting to learn more about health, probably from a performance standpoint. Like, I just wanted to play better. So I had to learn about nutrition and mindset and stretching and taking care of my body. I had a back injury, which was fairly severe, so I had to learn how to rehab, and all that kind of ties into health. So I think that's ultimately what got me interested in that. But the jump to naturopathic medicine, I don't know, because I had never even seen a naturopath. I didn't really know what it was. I actually just had a roommate say to me, like, have you ever heard of a naturopath? Like, you should check it out. And I was like, okay. So I looked online, and it said, you're going to learn about nutrition and mental health and herbalism and acupuncture. And I was like, cool, I want to learn all these things. And I just went for it, even though it's like a very expensive program, like huge commitment. But I just went for it, and it turned out really well. So something was guiding me. I don't know exactly what it was. But I can say that, like, growing up, I always had an appreciation for, I guess, different cultures, but also in particular, like, kung fu and martial arts and like kind of the mystical aspects of some of those cultures. I was always interested in that. And I guess I'd say I probably always believed in, natural healing, whereas some people just kind of grow up with the conventional system and they, think alternative medicine is all garbage. Whereas for me, I just always did believe in that, even though I had nothing to back it up. So I think that kind of seed was in me, and everything conspired at the right time and ended up in medicine.
So it sounds like you have been guided towards it through all your experiences to get into naturopathic way of doing things. And did you, at what point you decided that you want to be a naturopathic doctor? Because learning is a one thing, right? Going deeply and just having or getting that knowledge for your own sake is one thing, and there's a different thing when you want to go and share it with other people, help other people doing it.
Yeah, it wasn't until my fourth year of university, and I only did 4 years. So at some point, whenever my roommate said you should look into this, I did. It might have been like halfway through fourth year, early on. So I hadn't really even thought about it throughout my entire university career. My initial plan was actually to play professional volleyball in Europe. That's usually kind of the next step after university if you want to play. They don't really have a pro league here. And I mean, I don't know how it would have turned out. I wouldn't have been like, in the top leagues or anything, but that was my plan. But I think the back injury kind of set me back. And then, once I kind of heard about it and looked into it, I decided to apply, got in, and the rest is history.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So when you are thinking about naturopathic medicine or the natural type of medicine, what is first thing that comes to mind?
The first thing, usually my goal in naturopathic medicine is to support the body in healing itself. So that's always what I think of, that I'm not actually healing anyone. It's how can we get the body to self-heal. That's kind of, the premise. And I think that's what any good practitioner of any kind does and realizes, is that, it's not our medicine that's saving them. We can't, override the human body. It's the most intelligent creation on the planet, I would say. So we're kind of just getting out of its way, right? But supporting the body in its own healing. Yeah.
Makes sense. And like for people who are not super familiar, we spoke about it a little bit with Marisa earlier, but like what's the advantages of going into the natural way, natural medicine instead of conventional?
Yeah, I think the major difference is that we are trying to identify what is the root cause of the problem. So if someone has a headache, for example, it's not because you have a Tylenol deficiency or a Advil deficiency. It could be a number of reasons. You might be dehydrated. You might have tension in your traps in your neck that's causing the headache. It could be actually like a liver issue. There could be like so many things going on. Sometimes it's your teeth. So we're trying to figure out what is actually causing that problem and correcting it from the root. So there is a time and place for symptom management. That's typically more so the approach of Western medicine. So you have a symptom, we just want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But the way we look at it is the symptom is usually actually the body trying to, re-regulate and heal itself.
Yeah, combat the problem.
Yeah, so if you look at all the classes of drugs in conventional medicine, it's, antihistamine, antibiotic, anti-whatever. Like it's always fighting against the body, whereas I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to work with the body to fix it. And not to say that, there isn't a place for Western medicine. I think it's incredible for acute care, right? Like if you break your leg, go see them, not me, right? But for chronic diseases, it just, that model hasn't been working, right? So,
that's so true.
So we need to, dig a little bit deeper and try to figure out what's causing the problem in the first place, address that, and then stimulate the body's own healing response. So I think those are kind of the main differences.
And like, if you would... have someone that is completely unaware or have a misconception about the naturopathic medicine, what is one thing that you would like them to understand about it?
I think it's well, I guess one thing, like a lot of people who are very skeptical, they just like really have no idea what we do. But if I just break it down to some of the basic things, like I'm helping, if you were to see me for an issue, I would make sure we're addressing very fundamental things like, are you drinking enough water? Are you hydrated? Are you drinking good quality water, right? What kind of food are you eating? Are you eating food that's hurting your body and, causing food sensitivities or inflammation? Or are you eating proper nutrients? Like I think everyone can agree your body's going to function better if you have all the necessary nutrients, right?
That's right.
Are you sleeping well? Like everyone knows you need to sleep in order to have good health. Are you managing your stress? Like we all know stress is a major killer, right? So these are very basic things. I know there's other aspects of naturopathic medicine that are more difficult for people to comprehend. And some people, maybe are a little bit too far on the pseudoscience spectrum. Like you're going to find that in a lot of professions, right? There's a wide range of how people practice. But generally what I do is very grounded, logical stuff and just kind of focusing on like what are the fundamentals of human health, right? So I think for anyone who's curious about naturopathic medicine, just look into it with a open eye and realistically what we're trying to do is, like I said, focus on those foundations and stimulate the body's self-healing response. So it's a very logical approach in my opinion. It makes sense, and I think it's a great way to help people heal.
For sure, like as you mentioned earlier, nowadays the medicine went so far away from healing and just covering the symptoms. Went towards covering the symptoms that, at the end of the day, you are covering one symptom, which might be helping you with solving one issue, and then you might be suppressing something else. Right. And at the end of the day, that was something that drew me and Kat, my wife, to naturopathic medicine, because we were sick and tired of being a lab rats and testing drugs, which one might work for us. And at the end of the day, do you want to push chemicals into your body constantly just to cover symptoms, or do you really want to solve the issues you are having, right?
Yeah, and the problem is when you do start pushing things that are potentially more toxic and more aggressive, like you're bound to run into some issues, right? It may help with certain symptoms, but like you said, it's going to cause another area or issue down the line. You're never going to fix it unless you get to the root cause, right? So that's one of the things I like about naturopathic medicine. It's very safe, but at the same time, it's I need to explain to patients it's not an overnight fix, right? If you take some pharmaceuticals, it might magically cure your symptom, didn't actually get rid of the problem. But with us, it's usually going to take a little bit longer, right? Because that's just how nature works. Nothing is just going to flip overnight, right? So you need to slowly re-regulate the body. It's incredibly safe, but it requires a little bit more patience and more effort, right? Because you need to change your lifestyle.
Oh yeah. Big time. Like, you need to be willing to work on it, right? It's not like, as you mentioned, quick fix. It's not gonna be a magic pill. It's not an easy solution. And at the end of the day, I think it's pain threshold, I would think, because and delayed gratification, because nowadays we just want everything like that, solve, resolve, or go at it, buy it, bring it over and have it and all that. And that, I think that's the biggest problem of having. We want to have a solution here and now instead of working towards it, small steps, but incremental steps that gonna give long-term results instead of just here and now and just taking your mind off of the problem because you don't feel it at the moment.
And there's a lot of learning and wisdom to gain in sitting with that discomfort and the pain, right? Instead of just suppressing it right away, but actually just being present, experiencing it, and working out why is it there in the first place, kind of reflecting and figuring out what the problem is, right? And in today's world, like you said, we have that instant gratification, but also just that like go mindset. You never really have time to just sit down and reflect on like, okay, why am I getting this issue? And the more and more I practice, the more I realize that there are a lot of physical issues, but a lot of it is more mental, emotional, right? And when you sit down and have some quiet, that's when that monkey mind comes up, and then we usually try to suppress it by doing other stuff. That's right. But if you actually sit with it and have some time to reflect on it, then you'll figure out that pattern and hopefully be able to release it.
That makes so much sense. And like, would you say the sitting down with your pain, whether it's a pain or emotion, is a big part of the healing process, or a starter maybe?
So I usually don't start with that because it's very difficult for people. If someone tells me they have a meditation practice already, great, but that's not the average person, right? So usually I'm trying to focus on the low-hanging fruits, like helping people improve their diet or sleep or stress, whatever it is, in order to just feel a little bit better, have more energy, have more motivation, and then they can start doing the deeper work. Because the mental part of it is probably the most difficult, right? I mean, changing your diet is hard too, but it's kind of just a discipline thing, right? But to really look at some of your deep subconscious problems, it can be tough, especially if you have some deeper stuff. Like a lot of people have some serious trauma to deal with, and it's way easier for you to just put that away. So you need to be in a state where you can handle that, right? So I usually focus on the foundations and try to, build the person up first, and then we'll go to that deeper work. That's my approach. Other people probably go to the deeper stuff right away, just tear the Band-Aid off. But I find it more effective to start with some of the lower hanging fruits and get people's motivation and confidence up, So once you start seeing the results, it does take time, but at the same time, if you clean up your diet for even a week or two, you notice the difference, right? Yeah. Or if you just get on a regular sleep habit, like it can be life-changing. And then from there, you want to know, okay, what's next? How can I improve next? You have more energy, you start exercising, right? You're exercising, your sleep gets better, and then suddenly your mindset changes and you can start to deal with those mental things. So, yeah.
It sounds like what I just realized is that maybe a good metaphor of naturopathic medicine would be treating you guys as family doctors, basically, instead of treating as a specialist. Right, because the family doctor is someone who you get and build relationship with, and they know all your history, what you're going through, both on a physical, biological, but also mental spheres in your life, whether it's stress or anything else. But that person have a major overview of whatever is happening, right? And in the same way, I feel like these things may help you guys to kind of, as you mentioned earlier, just step up the game for a customer, for you guys are patients, right? Step up a game. So starting with whether it's sleep and then food and then stress management and then deep internal work, all those to kind of go through the process. Do you feel like you have a process that you go through with every person that you treat? Like,
yeah, not like a rigid protocol. No, I kind of I've thought about that, and I think it can be effective, and a lot of people do operate like that. But I just try to prioritize what the person needs. So you really need to listen to what's going on with them and figure out, okay, like I said, what is the lowest hanging fruit? For some people, changing their sleep is going to be no problem. For other people who work like shifts or they have other issues going on, we're not going to be able to switch that right away. So we might need to focus more on the diet piece. So I'm just looking at what are the things that are going to be easy for them to change, because a lot of the change is really a psychology thing, right? So that's half of our job is figuring out, okay, how can we get the patients to do what we want them to do, right? What they need to do to heal. So I don't really follow protocol, but loosely in my head, kind of like I said, focusing more on those foundational physical things and then moving up the chain to more mental, emotional stuff. And honestly, I am much better at the physical stuff. There's a lot of mental, emotional stuff and different techniques that we didn't learn a ton about in school. So I'm still working on that stuff with myself, to improve that, but also how I can better help patients there. I'd say that's the most difficult part, right?
It is. Yeah, it is for sure, because it's like if you look at it from perspective of the work, at least from my perspective, it's to be physically healthy, you need to build routines, to have a proper kind of diet or way of eating, because I don't really like a term of diets, because those are limiting factors, right? It's and at the end of the day, if you want something to work for you, you need to look at it as you guys look at it, meaning long term, right? So the way of eating. And for that, you need real true discipline and just keeping track of everything that you are doing. And then even if you make a step further, the mental part, that's all those combined, plus making sure that you are spending time with yourself on a regular basis, right? Which is, we are usually just running all the time, and we forget about that part, which is pretty important.
No, I agree. I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat a couple years ago, and that was one of the most challenging things in my life, but also one of the most rewarding. The first few days were like crazy, just monkey mind, like nonstop, and you're not allowed to talk to anyone or look at anyone.
So it's a silent one.
Yes. So you're literally in your own world. Obviously you don't have your phone. They don't even want you journaling or reading. It's literally just like you in your own mind. So the first 3 days were kind of hell, but eventually you kind of get over that, and then suddenly it's bliss. And I thought naively, I was like, oh, I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life. I cracked the code. But then you go back to your old ways, right? And start, you know, keeping yourself distracted. So it's a lifelong process, right? But I think everyone needs to have some sort of practice. It doesn't have to be seated meditation, but, you know, it could just be walking in nature, whatever it is that is, you know, disconnecting you from all the stuff going on and giving you a bit of quiet so you can, you know, you can grow, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, I feel like I love, and this is part of which I need a lot, which is nature. Every time I go, whether it's gonna be for one day only, it always calms me down, and then I'm coming back completely refreshed and re-energized. Right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And like you said, it doesn't even have to be a day. Just going for like a 1 hour hike, right? Like that alone is crazy. How much of an impact it has.
That's right.
And if you think about it, that's kind of where we're designed to live, right?
Yeah.
So. But I don't think you can beat the healing power of nature.
Yeah. That's for sure. And one thing, as you mentioned, that's how we are designed to live. That's how our ancestors lived, in nature, around nature, in cohesive kind of structure with it.
Yeah.
But this is completely opposite from what we are doing to ourselves these days. We are sitting in our cars, we're sitting in front of computers, monitors, cell phones all the time.
Right.
Like, just looking at the city out here, like most of the office buildings do not have even openable windows.
Right.
So you don't have air, which is crucial for you, right?
Yeah.
It's there's so many things that we are doing to ourselves just to get ourselves further and further disconnected from nature that gives us full capabilities, I guess.
No, I agree. I think it's a major issue. We've essentially put ourselves in a zoo, and our living conditions in the zoo aren't that great, right? I think there's a happy balance, right? Like, we're not going to go back to hunter-gatherer times unless there's like a mass extinction event. But like, there's a lot of positives to this way of living, but we've just I think the pendulum has swung too far, right? And we're so detached from nature, but we can find ways to live kind of in harmony. And I love even just you having like plants in here. Like, that's one simple way, just putting plants in your house, right?
Yeah.
But I think we need to totally reimagine the way we like build houses, and, you know, just the way we grow food. Like, there's so many open spaces where it's just grass.
Yeah.
Or, you know, worse than that, like nothing. But we could easily be growing like food there, right? And it'd be so easy just to plant like apple trees everywhere in the city.
That's
and
true.
At least be connecting with our food in that aspect.
Yeah.
It's like weird for people to take their shoes off sometimes, whereas like that's such a natural thing, and it's actually very healthy for us to be standing barefoot on the earth.
That's
like, there's so many ways we're disconnected, but I think we just need to kind of find that balance, right? Because there are positives to this, but there's less positives to nature, and we gotta do something, or else we're probably not going down the best path in terms of health, right?
Yeah. And I believe, and listening to you and talking to Marisa as well, you guys are kind of putting out there the natural way and going about your life thinking in terms of going back to roots, going back to how we as a human supposed to live, how we supposed to heal, how we supposed to move, how we supposed to be connected to nature, how to disconnect from our stressors, because these are constant, especially in big cities. Like, if you live on the countryside, it's a different story. The life is slower. You don't deal with traffic, you don't deal with all the external, so many external conditions. But the beauty of, I think, what from my perspective helped me understand it is, first of all, I didn't want to be dragged to the rest of my life just to cover symptoms. And second of all, if naturopathic medicine, for me, it's a natural way of healing and going about making the most efficient way that your body is working based on nature. And I think, kind of to your point about the being in the city and having all this stuff
kind of against us. It's such an uphill battle. And I feel like we're going to lose that battle in the long run. So it just needs to be much easier for us. So like you said, when you live in a rural area, you only have to think about a lot of those things because it's just built into your lifestyle, right? So we need to find ways to start to do that so we don't have to be thinking like, even in my lifestyle, I always have to be thinking like, okay, I need to go outside and watch the sunrise to help us regulate my circadian rhythm. I have to make an effort to be doing all these things. Whereas back in the day, you didn't have to think about it. You were just drinking clean spring water. Your circadian rhythm was perfect because you're living in nature. You're barefoot, so you're getting all those benefits, eating organic food. Now we need to go to the grocery store and actually think and use our logic to determine what foods we need to be eating. So I think as a society, we need to figure out ways to make it more automated, that it's just part of our lifestyle. We don't think about it, and health just occurs naturally.
Do you believe that it might get better, or because just looking at recent, I would say 30 years, the food types and all the modified food went really sideways. But like there are tendencies, and I would say it's fashionable now to eat better food, and it's getting that direction. But do you think it's at any point in time it can get back to the mainstream too?
Yeah, I do think so. But I think it'll take a while, and it could get, I anticipate it's still going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. But I am optimistic. And like you said, there's a lot of people now who are becoming much more aware of that. And yeah, we kind of have to start changing like our farming practices, especially in food practices. There's a lot of estimates, I don't know how accurate there are, but saying that, in 50, 60 years, we won't be able to grow food because our soils are so depleted. But now there's this huge like regenerative agriculture movement. People are more into permaculture and organic farming and all that kind of stuff. So kind of by necessity, I think we'll need to at some point. I just don't know how much worse it's going to get before that happens. But I do see so many people who are becoming more aware and taking the steps to live better. So I do think so. And I really think once we hit like a critical mass of people who are thinking like that, it just kind of takes over and it will spread, right? I don't like to use the analogy of COVID, but it was like so much fear that just spread like crazy, right? But I think the same thing can happen with these positive movements too. I think once it hits a certain point, that might be the only thing more contagious than fear actually. So I think we will hit this point where we're all just thinking about health in this way and it just explodes. So hopefully I'm not being too optimistic, but that's what I think is going to happen eventually.
I hope it's not a utopia. And we are going in that direction. I'm fully on the supportive side of things. I am not that optimistic, as you know, but it's definitely the only way for us as a humanity to still exist and not kind of kill the place we call home as well, right? Which is a big
I think at the very least, and we're kind of seeing it now, there's almost a divide. There are people who are kind of waking up and saying, hey, I want to do things differently. You see people like buying land and starting communities and being more self-sufficient. And you see other people who are going the opposite, and they're getting further sucked into tech and living, in this VR world and all that kind of stuff. And that's fine. Like everyone can make their own choice. But I think, at least there are going to be options for people who want to live that way, right? So and we'll see what happens. Maybe the tech side of it and the more hyper materialistic, they're turn into cyborgs and not have to worry about the health issues, right? I don't know, but I do think that there is going to be an option, and it's growing, right? So I'm optimistic in the sense that at least a good portion of people are going to be able to turn things around.
Yeah. Makes sense. I wanted to ask you just a little bit turning from the background, from the work, but kind of related a little bit. I wanted to start with your definition of a maverick.
Of a maverick. So I only know a maverick as like a horse. Is that the actual definition? A maverick is like a type of horse?
There are different definitions to it.
Okay.
As a person, there is a maverick as a horse, but those are the unique ones, right?
Okay.
The unique horses.
Gotcha.
But then also it kind of transfers towards a person, which in the vocabulary definition is a person who is a trailblazer, who goes through life on their own terms, and gets things done, usually against the crowd and the regular way,
like a renegade maverick, that kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Gotcha.
Swimming against the best fish swim against the current, right? That type of thing. So, Andrew, how are you different?
I think so. It kind of goes back to just embracing being different, but I think I've always had the ability to just think outside the box in certain aspects. And I don't know where I got that from, but the idea of like just living a different life. Like I think a lot of people just kind of get sucked into the 9 to 5, we'll say, where like they just know this is the only existence. You have to go to work and do this, and then on weekends I get drunk, and then Monday it's whatever, back to the grind. And it's kind of like a sad existence for a lot of people. I mean, some people enjoy their jobs, but a lot of people don't. But I know from like a fairly young age, at least in high school, I was thinking about different ways of like living off the land. Like I was looking up like earth ships. I don't know if you've heard about those, but they're like completely self-sufficient homes that you can build from like recycled materials mostly. They have like a rainwater catchment system, and they have like an indoor greenhouse built in, and it's all like very renewable. And I'm not sure how efficient they are in Canada, to be honest, but they work in other areas of the world very well. So that kind of stuff I was already thinking about at a young age. And I've always just thought about a more ideal way to live for humans. And it might have started more selfishly, but I think more so now I want to help people. That's why I got into naturopathic medicine. But I'm just always thinking about different ways how we can live a different life. So kind of like I mentioned about how we could easily be planting fruit trees everywhere, right?
That's right.
I'm just imagining a different way of being, and I know it's possible. Hopefully in my lifetime, I think it is. But I think just being able to think that way and having the faith that we can live differently. And part of that too, I think, has been inspired from studying some of these ancient cultures. Like there's so much wisdom there. And I think we can actually learn a lot from going back, right? And incorporating those practices to create a better life for everyone. But yeah, I would say that's the one thing for me. I think I just have this unique ability to think differently about things.
That's awesome. No, it's amazing. And so based on that, where are you now?
Well, so the problem with always thinking about things is that I don't always implement them, right? So I'm working now on kind of putting this stuff into action. And my goal in the next couple of years is to have a property where I can start being more self-sufficient and ideally finding a way that we can tie community into that. So I think the big gap right now is that you either live kind of that normal life, in the city or whatever it is, or you live in a rural area but alone, but there's really no place where you have that community. And I think that's where we're designed, or how we're designed to live, right? So I know there's a lot of restrictions in terms of building laws and that kind of stuff, and we discussed this before, why not just split on a bunch of land with friends and family and whoever you want to be there, and you can do a lot of things together. You can start your own permaculture operation, growing your food. You can help each other build your houses.
That's right.
You can work together, still have your own privacy, but I don't see why that isn't a more common way of living. It should be. I feel like that's the ideal way to live, and we would be much happier doing that. So working towards that. I think right now I'm in the place where I'm ready to act on it, and I just need to start taking those steps. And yeah, I think it's just a challenge in Canada because it's not very common, but people do that in other countries. It's becoming a lot more popular in South and Central America, for example. I think in the States too, they have a little bit more freedom, but we can make it work here.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's for certain. Based on that, where do you kind of answer the question, where do you want to go?
Okay. So maybe I'll talk about where I'm at right now. So right now, mostly seeing patients. I'm trying to develop my craft as a naturopathic doctor, so build my patient base, learn how I can most effectively help people. And I know it's going to be a lifelong process, but I've really just been working on that and figuring out how, how I can best help people. Yeah. I've also, I guess, a little bit more recently been looking more into finances and how I can develop more passive income. I think that's an important thing in today's society to develop more freedom. So I love my job and it's great, but at the end of the day, I'm still trading time for money, right? You have to see a patient, put in the work, get the money, and it's fairly lucrative, but I'd like to be able to make some money while I'm sleeping. So still working on that part of it, but maybe coming out with some courses. I think it's another important thing with our type of medicine. We can help a lot of people one-on-one, but we need to be able to scale this to everyone.
That's true.
And my ultimate goal is that I'm trying to teach people to take care of themselves. Like I don't want patients coming to see me all the time. We might need to initially, but over time, I want to teach people how they can take care of themselves. And I think that's ultimately where we're headed as a society too, right? Not being so dependent on the man in the white coat to heal them, right? We all have the tools inside of us. And some people are going to be able to guide us. I think I see that as my role as teaching people. So maybe coming in with a different format where it's one to many, maybe, and we already do put out some content online, but maybe monetizing that would be good. Yeah. I know I'm still speaking about the future, but
that's good. That's good. Yeah. And you a little bit touched on it, how you're going to get there, but I want to dive a little bit deeper.
Sure.
What's the plan?
Yeah, so a big part of it is the financial piece, is making sure that I can secure the land and then have the finances to start building. But I feel like the land is very central. That to me is the greatest asset because there's so much you can do with it, right? So I think just building up the finances to do that. And then, and part of that too is going to be finding the people who, I want to be a part of that with me.
Yeah.
And we might have to start alone, I'm not sure, but ideally it'd be nice to have like-minded people. And from there, I don't know a ton about the building part of it, but having some people with expertise there, I think is going to be really important.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to build houses that are sustainable and, with renewable resources, ideally would be great. And hopefully not too expensive.
Oh yeah.
And then also, I have some knowledge of gardening and permaculture and that kind of stuff, but really not where I would like it to be. So learning more about that. And I think kind of those pieces, right? Those are, once you have that, those are kind of your main, fundamentals that you need to survive, right? If you have shelter and food and community, you're pretty set, right? And I think if we could tackle that for most people on the planet, then you think about like how much of your stress and worries kind of go away, right? Once we have that, then we have the freedom to be creative and not have to do that 9-to-5 grind, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not against capitalism or money or anything like that, but I think we would be in a better world if it wasn't such a stress, right? For a lot of us, we have to do so much just to make money to stay alive. But if we can have those basic needs already met, then it just allows more freedom just to enjoy life, right?
So true.
Yeah.
Based on what you said, you are trying to go into the route of building some type of community. So you consider yourself a community type of person, a tribal kind of person?
Yeah, I would consider myself an introvert, so I would probably be, fine to some extent, not having a bunch of social interaction, but I still think it's an essential human need, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I don't have the skills to do all of those things, right? I have unique skills in certain areas, but like building, for example, I cannot build a house right now. I have no idea. I know you can learn a lot of stuff on YouTube, but it'd be way easier to have someone with, skills there.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about gardening and permaculture, but there's other people who know way more. So if we can combine all these skills, then you can accomplish so much, right? And I think that's where we need to collaborate more, and that's where the community is important. And obviously just the social connection part. Like, I think humans are just social creatures, right? And we need that to nourish our hearts or our souls. So yeah, that's definitely a big part of it.
Awesome. I wanna dive deeper into a opposite spectrum of things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with, what is your failure story?
My failure story. I think, probably in recent years, what comes to mind is when the pandemic started. So we basically started our practice like a few months before the pandemic started. And it was difficult. Like, I don't have much business experience. I really don't love the marketing side of it, and I mean anything business in general. I'd rather just like do the work and get paid for it. But that in combination with the pandemic was very difficult, especially for that first year. And it was one of the first times in my life that I felt like I wasn't succeeding at something. So from what I always remember as a child, I did very well in school. I was good academically. I always succeeded in sports. Like, I basically made all the teams I tried out for, did well. And I think I just got praised for, always being good at stuff and achieving. And then here was a period where I was trying to build up a business and it wasn't going so well. That was kind of like, and it definitely felt, I think there were a lot of emotions. It's tough to tease out what it was because the pandemic was very frustrating to me for a number of reasons. But all of that was just kind of like a low point for me, and definitely, probably the worst year or two of my life, to be honest. So that kind of felt like a failure to me, is not succeeding business wise.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can make excuses and say it was difficult times and all this stuff, but I think, it just felt like I was not succeeding business wise, and I could have taken other steps to do something about it, but I didn't. So that's probably my biggest failure. Hopefully that's the biggest one of my life.
I wish you that for sure. That would be awesome. And on the flip side of things, then what does success mean to you?
For me in my life, or just what does it mean generally?
For you, yeah.
Let's see. I think completing naturopathic school was that for me was a big accomplishment. I know, like, academically that I could do it. That's not so much a thing, but I think just the persistence to go through that program, and not just succeed in that aspect of it, but creating community. Like, I would say I stepped outside of my comfort zone to, like, meet new friends and do new things that I hadn't normally done before.
Makes sense.
And there's a lot of challenging things, like when we have to do like practical exams. So written exams have always been easy for me. I'm just good at multiple choice and good at memorizing stuff. So I'm very lucky. But when you do a practical exam, it's totally different. You have to do hands-on stuff. Sometimes there's people watching you. So there were a lot of those situations, and I felt like I really did well mentally, staying composed and getting through all those things. And you're just learning so much new stuff in school that's totally out of your wheelhouse. Like, I didn't learn a ton of that in university. So it's just, all this new information coming in. Very challenging course load, like 10, 12 courses a year. You don't really have much time. But I managed to do that, make a bunch of friends, meet my partner, and have a successful relationship. Like, there was just so much that went on during that time. And I would say overall that was a huge success for me. So,
So for it sounds like there were some challenges, but also there were successes that were satisfying and well established.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're going through it, sometimes it doesn't feel like a success, but then when you look back on it, it's like, hey, I went through a lot and I came out on top, right? And I didn't go broke either, so that's a plus too.
It is. So right now you guys are 3 or 4 years in business?
I think 3.5. Yeah.
3.5.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so then on that field, who is your ideal client?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm definitely more of a generalist where I don't kind of specialize in one thing, but I do like working with people who are looking for health optimization. So I work at another clinic as well, which deals mostly with they kind of brand as like health optimization, I guess, or high performance. So there's a lot of athletes, a lot of entrepreneurs, firefighters, police officers, that kind of stuff. And I do really enjoy that type of person because they're already very motivated to make changes. And I think it's just similar to me. Like I can really relate to it. Because I've always been fairly healthy. I've been an athlete, and I'm just looking, okay, how can I perform even better? And I think that's a population that now is getting more attention. But traditionally, like if you went to a medical doctor and you were healthy and you said, hey, how can I feel better? Like they're gonna have no answers for you, right?
Oh yes.
But now it's actually, a thing, right? Anti-aging, if you want to call it that. I don't really like that term, but how can I live longer and better, and how can I just perform at my best? So I really like those types of people. Challenging cases too are fun, but I would say the most important thing for me is people who are willing to make the changes. It's kind of frustrating when you're asking people to do things and they come back 2 months later and say, yeah, sorry, I didn't do anything. And I get there's reasons, right? A lot of it's psychological and it's difficult, right? Yeah. But it's just nice when someone says, yep, I did this, and I feel better. And it's just great. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Makes so much sense. And what's the biggest problem that you are facing?
Yeah, I think right now it's trying to kind of bridge the gap and go to those next steps. So like I said, I'm always thinking about these ideas. Okay, how can I get land and start a community and, move forward into this way of living? And I think there's definitely some blocks, maybe some like subconscious blocks that are preventing me from manifesting that. And some of it is just financial too. Like realistically, we haven't been working for that long. Like school is expensive, living in Toronto is expensive, and now we're just finally starting to work. So can't expect everything all at once, but I think that is the main problem, is kind of manifesting those next steps. And I do feel like we're getting closer and closer to it. It's becoming more and more tangible, but it's just kind of making it happen. Yeah. And there's a lot of fear too. Like, we've never purchased a house, so it's obviously a huge financial investment, or land. Like we haven't made any type of real estate investment like that. So you always think like, oh, well, what happens if this happens or that happens? So a lot of it is just overcoming that fear and having the courage to take the step, right?
Go outside of your regular comfort and what is known.
Yeah. And it's like my ideal isn't just buying a regular home. I mean, we'll see what happens. I can't predict the future, but this type of investment is also an even more outside the box and potentially more riskier, right? So
true.
Yeah.
So true. Is there any tools or technologies, maybe even relationships that you, since you started to where you got now, you leveraged to get more comfortable, but also more progress more in the process?
Yeah. I think one thing that's been helpful for me is some sort of like meditation practice. So either, I guess the two main things that I do are either like a seated meditation or Qigong. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Tai Chi. It's like a Chinese form of yoga, you could say, a little bit more gentle. But I've been practicing that for 3-4 years now. And I find when I'm consistent with either one of those, my mind is just so much clearer, and it's much easier to focus on what really matters, right? Yeah. When I don't have something like that, I just tend to get distracted on things. Like you open up your laptop and I'm checking emails, like, I'm on whatever, on Google, searching something on YouTube, and you just, there's so many distractions that I think it's really important to have that kind of laser focus to achieve your goals. So having some sort of mindfulness practice for me has been really big. I think getting back into sports has also been really helpful for me. I don't think I realized it, but I had played so many sports growing up, and when you play like varsity volleyball, you're playing 2 hours a day basically, like it's kind of your life. And then after that, I took a pretty long break, and especially during COVID, I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I don't think like anyone was in Canada, at least. But getting back into that, just I guess it's just a deep passion of mine. It's part of it's probably the playing aspect, right? Like we forget to play as adults, just any type of play.
That's true.
But also to add the physicality part of it, and confidence building. So that has been huge for me.
Are you on the team right now?
Yeah, I'm playing beach volleyball in Brampton.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. So those have been big. And then, I think just branching out and just meeting more people, whether it's going to events with other like naturopathic doctors or doing some online stuff, like even this opportunity and being on other podcasts, that kind of stuff. It just opens the doors to so many connections, right?
So true.
And I would, like I said, I've tended to be more introverted. Like I don't tend to go out and just try to form relationships. But now that I'm being more open to that, networking is huge. It's not, again, nothing I really learned in school related to like business and networking and that kind of stuff. But once you just meet a few people, next thing you know, I say, hey, I know a guy who does this that you might be interested in, right? And then you get to meet that guy, and that's how you become successful in life, essentially. So, and that's the same thing with community. This is a different form of community, and I guess that's the beauty with all this modern stuff is that I don't even need to necessarily meet someone face to face, but I can create a connection, talk to someone on FaceTime, and they can dramatically impact my business or whatever it is, right? So,
that's so true. Yeah. So true. It's a completely different approach, and it, like, technology gives us a cutting edge compared to like regular ways of doing businesses, going about your career or whatever you may have. It's definitely a big leverage towards getting your words across to more people, right, as well. And learning as well, right? There's so much information that you can find on the internet these days that you don't really, if you want to, you don't really need to go to any schools, because you can find it all if you want to.
100%. I think the challenge, like I was saying earlier, is just being able to focus on that thing, right? And figuring out, how can I find these resources? But 100%. You could probably learn everything I learned in school on the internet if I really wanted to. But
besides the practical part, for sure.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, like, just the connections I made though there, like that's the kind of stuff where even though I paid a bunch of money, like that's kind of priceless, right? And meeting Marissa, my partner.
That's
like,
right.
Wouldn't have met her on YouTube, right?
That's definitely the other aspect of having those real connections and talking to people. One thing is working on a brand and talking to bigger audience and putting your word across. A second and a completely different thing is building those personal connections that can benefit in the physical businesses or physical work done together with the other person, right? I feel I'm still kind of old-fashioned in that way. I feel that this is a huge value, and I refuse to give it away in a sense, because as you mentioned earlier, it's at the end of the day, we are social creatures and we need each other to be healthy, to grow, to expand our horizons. So if we would do that only on our own time, in our own place, just looking through books or internet, like, we would be lacking a lot.
Yes. I think you need to find the balance for sure. I think that's the problem with like social media today, is it's just like bombarded with all this information, but it's not actual connection. And then you see how people talk to each other, and you wouldn't actually talk to someone like that face to face, right? I'm talking more about like the trolling, right? When you're just commenting all this shit. Like,
so true.
It's like, I don't think you would actually say that to that person's face, but since it's through a screen, it's different, right? But it's also such a valuable tool to like see all this potentially good information. So, but I think you're right. I think we need to prioritize getting back more so to the face-to-face connection. And one of the things that I would like to do ideally is, when it doesn't have to be like on the land that I'm on, but, at like a retreat center of some sort, is having people come together and do like group healing. I think that can be the most transformative thing, coming together and doing whatever it is. It could be group yoga or qigong, whatever it is. There's so many things you could do, but having that in-person aspect is, I think it's going to be much more transformative than any like online program that someone takes, right?
That's so true. So true. Talking about the community and talking about having people around and kind of sharing things with them, what would you do to help someone from that group, that community, help them feel that they belong more?
Yeah, I think trying to find out like what someone's passion is and kind of like, boost that up. And just their interests and skills. I think everyone has inherent skills, and you could even, from a spiritual perspective, say they have like their life purpose, and just helping people to like develop that. And ultimately, I think it needs to be a self-developed thing, but you can help other people, encourage them and help them find that. But I think when everyone is playing their part, the thing that they enjoy doing and they're good at, that's when you're going to find the most success. So that's probably the key to any of those successful communities is figuring out, okay, I'm the medicine guy, I'm good at foraging herbs, whatever.
Yeah.
You're better at whatever other skill. You have the builder, we have like all these other people who can, and I think the key is that you need to be passionate about it though, right? Or else it's just going to fizzle out eventually.
That's true.
So I think that's one of the keys to overall success in life is just figuring out what are you good at, what's your passion, putting those together.
Yeah.
And then,
so true.
Yeah.
So true. Makes so much sense. We're gonna run through couple last questions to sum it up.
Okay.
They're gonna go a little bit deeper as well.
Okay.
So let's start with your advice. What would you advise Mavericks or people who are struggling, being alone, who are on that journey of being different and kind of trying to find their own way and their own voice, and also appreciation to who they are instead of neglecting that part? What should they do? Basically, what way should they approach those problems to find the solutions they're looking for?
Yeah, I would say two things. One that I already spoke about a bit is spending more time in silence, spending more time with yourself and getting clear on what your purpose is. And yeah, I think, the courage, I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. Like, it's obviously an internal thing.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes what people really need is just the clarity to know, like, this is right. Because sometimes we're second guessing ourselves, right? We're thinking, maybe this is what I should do. And then you have that other voice saying, no, maybe I shouldn't. But I think if you give yourself enough time in silence alone, then you'll gain that clarity. Whereas if you're always listening to other people saying this and that, and the media is telling you to do this, and social media is telling you to do that, it's hard to find that inner truth, right?
Yeah.
So having some silence like that is very helpful. But then also, on the flip side, finding other people who are like-minded, and they don't have to have the exact same passions or purpose or whatever it is, but other people who are doing something similar to what you want to do, or other Mavericks, right? And then I think through community, encouraging those people, right? Like I have so many friends who have, well, I guess both ways. So I've encouraged them. I said, like, hey man, you're like really good at this. You should actually pursue this. And they've kind of been on the fence about it. And that's all they need just to get more confidence, right?
Extra push.
Yeah. And other people have done that to me too, where I've kind of been doubting something and they're like, hey man, that like video you posted or whatever, like, I think that's really cool. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't even know, like, someone watched that and appreciated it.
Yeah.
And then it gives you the confidence, right? So I think it helps to find that community of people who are going to support you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it does need to come from within too. So kind of balancing those two things.
Makes sense. Makes so much sense. What question would you like to be asked more often?
Wow, that's a really good question. I really like talking about human potential. I'm trying to think of how the question would be phrased, but maybe something along the lines of like, what do you think humans are capable of? Something like that, right? I really enjoy talking about that and brainstorming with other people who are thinking similarly.
So what is that people are capable of in your opinion?
Well, I think it's even like further beyond what we can comprehend. I think it's, infinite basically. And I'll share a story because this man's been very influential to me, but it really opened my eyes to what I thought was possible. So there's I'm not going to give his name or details or anything like that, but he was a Shaolin monk. And so he grew up in a temple. And for those who aren't familiar with Shaolin monks, they basically are like human Jedis, probably the closest things to like Jedis. So they basically wake up and train all day. So it's either like martial arts, meditation, qigong, and that's just your life. That's all they do. And you can look them up on YouTube or watch documentaries about like the crazy human feats they can do, like 2-finger handstands and crazy mobility and like just wild things. But when you think about it, that's because that's all they're training like that, right? The average person, we just sit in our butt all day and watch Netflix, and so obviously we can't do that. But if you put your mind to it, you can achieve crazy things. So this guy, he also has learned like a family healing practice that has been passed down for generations. I'm not sure how long, but Marissa and I went to see him, and he does this healing technique where he basically puts his hand on you, starts channeling this energy, and you can feel this tangible electricity running through your body. And at the beginning it's kind of mild, but by the end it's so strong. Like he's touching my neck, and my whole arm is just flailing uncontrollably. It literally is electricity running through your body, and he's just channeling this from I don't even know where. And it sounds crazy. A lot of people don't believe me, but everyone who I've told to go see him, they've said the same thing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Like no idea how he does it. But after having that treatment, the list of things that I thought were impossible just shrunk significantly, right? Because suddenly it's like, well, if he can do this, like what else is possible, right?
Yeah. So
I think all it takes is one thing like that. But I think we're just so incredibly capable of, amazing things. But we limit ourselves. I think that's all it is. It's just a mental thing of us telling ourselves, no, I can't do that, right? And collectively, this happens all the time. You see someone who can do something, and then suddenly you believe, wait a minute, maybe I can do that too.
Yep.
And I don't think I can, heal people with my hands to that degree, but at least it gives me some encouragement that if maybe I practice more qigong and he's showed me some techniques, then I can at least have a fraction of that to help people heal with your hands, right? A lot of people think that's complete woo to heal someone else with your hands, but after seeing that, 100% it's not, right? So other people, have you heard of Wim Hof?
Yeah, of course.
That kind of thing too. Like everyone said it was impossible. Like you would die if you were under a cold for that long. This guy climbed Mount Everest in his shorts, right?
Or run Arctic Circle in marathon or something.
Like crazy things like that. So I just like talking about those people, and then also trying to bring it back to, okay, like it's easy for us to say, yeah, well, he can do that, but I can't. But then to try to embody and figure out, what am I capable of as an individual, and how can I help others kind of, raise our collective consciousness or capability, if you want to call it that.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Do you want to share what was the name of the practice that you mentioned, the practitioner? What type of healing is it?
I actually don't know what it's called, but I've taken some classes with him, and they're basically like qigong and tai chi classes.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of it's very slow movements coordinated with the breath. And it's about gathering energy or chi. So that's kind of the premise of like qigong. So some of it is movement. So you'd be kind of, bringing your hands up and then above your head and trying to channel it to certain areas of your body. Other ones are like static poses where you're just focusing on, absorbing energy. And after you practice for a while, you can start to feel subtle things. Like it might just be a bit of tingling or heat in your hands, right? And I guess if you do that enough, you can get to the point where you can generate physical energy. But he was saying like you could use it for healing, but you could also use it for combat, right? So I think that's what some of those Shaolin monks are doing. They're channeling that energy to be able to, break a brick with their hands, and somehow their hand is fine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds really close to Jedi, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Channeling the energy towards combat for sure, yeah. As a summary and the last question for the evening, what have been the greatest day of your life?
Greatest day of my life.
Yeah, what comes to mind right now was at some point during the pandemic, I went backcountry camping with two of my friends. And it was like somewhere in Muskoka, and we didn't have like a place really planned out. We just kind of, we were bushwhacking, right? We were going through some like rough terrain. Finally, we ended up on this like beautiful lake, basically, and we were the only ones there. And we ended up getting floaties, which was a really smart idea. Like we went into town the one day and got some floaties, and then came back. And that whole day we were just outside, floating on the water. And it was just like one of those incredible days in terms of like temperature, but also the water temperature is like the same as like your skin. Like it just felt, we were just like floating in nothingness. It was so nice, and just like pure connection to nature. And we had been there for a few days too, so you're kind of starting to soften into nature a bit. So we basically did that all day. We came back up. It seemed like throughout the day, as soon as we got there, we saw these wild blueberries that weren't quite ripe yet. But it seemed like throughout the day, somehow they had just like ripened in perfect timing for us to like come back to them. So we were harvesting our own wild blueberries. We had a slingshot. We were just like trying to hunt and like, I don't know, just be our version of hunter-gatherers. Had a fire at night and slept in hammocks outside. But I always think back to like, it was a whole week that we did that, and it was incredible, but especially that day. But I always think about how impactful that was. Like I'm saying, this is one of the best days of my life, and it was so simple, right? We were just in nature. We didn't have any technology. It was just me and my friends connecting to the elements. Did some fishing later on that day, right? And we basically did nothing all day, but it was one of the best days of my life. And I think we can just incorporate that kind of stuff into our life way more to bring us more happiness.
For sure.
Yeah.
Andrew, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And it was amazing to have you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And it's a wrap. We dare you. If you are bold enough, hit subscribe, repost the rebellion, and don't miss out on next week's episode. It's going to be bloody brilliant. See you on the next one.
For anyone who's curious about naturopathic medicine, just look into it with a open eye. And realistically, what we're trying to do is, like I said, focus on those foundations and stimulate the body's self-healing response.